On this episode, I would love to talk through traveler timeline. I feel like that's a really, really common question our recruiters get asked. I feel like we talk through it all the time, and so maybe hopefully helpful information to talk through the traveler timeline. So it's really just never too early to talk to a company years in advance. It's not too early. I feel like if I was in the same shoes of traveling, I would want to know all the things before I made any type of decision to kind of heads first into it. Right, so usually a year in advance, we're talking to somebody who has travel on their radar. How does it work? What's the job market? What's the pay? What is the stipend stuff? Talking through these terms that once you start traveling, it's kind of rinse and repeat, but it's all new. And so we want to talk through that, get to know a company, kind of figure out where you'd want to go. If there's licenses, gives you plenty of time to get those. And so it's just really never too early to connect with us. So for that timeline, it really just starts when travel gets on somebody's radar. But when it really gets kind of more fast and furious outside of just understanding the job market is usually about 2 months in advance, right? Probably by then, if you want to start in about 2 months, we really want to hit the gas and go. So we want to get a profile on board for you. So resumes, skills checklists, references, we can get those profile documents that year, 2 years in advance we talk, but a lot of facilities will have kind of criteria on them. They want recent references, they want an updated resume. So that's why usually we wait till you're kind of like really ready to start submitting and hit the gas to get that profile. And again, we'd love to submit you 6 months, a year in advance to really kind of type A, I am playing it. But unfortunately, these job needs are typically 13 weeks, 3 months. So if they commit to somebody too far in advance, they can have a whole traveler start and end. And so that's why usually, about that 2-month mark is when we'll start looking at profiles, with this sweet spot usually being about 6 weeks. And so kind of to walk those dates back, again, about 2 months before you want to start a contract, we really want to have your profile ready to go, licenses in order that we might want to be getting, and then we want to start submitting. And so we're going to be really looking at jobs, like where are you hoping to go? What's that job market? Getting those jobs in front of you 2 months before your start date. And we might want to start submitting. You never know, you can get a little lucky, but typically when you're submitting about 2 months out, you're getting a little bit from facilities of, man, I like that profile, but it's just a little far out for me. And so that's okay though, right? It's getting us used to submitting, getting your name in front of them. They're getting familiar with you. And then 2 weeks goes by, and if they haven't gotten a ton of profiles, okay, now that's not looking too far out of a start date. So 6 weeks is when you actually, I feel like, start to get the interviews and the calls. So we're submitting as the company, we've got your profile, you're telling me I want this job. And so we're sending your profile, and then it's ultimately a facility saying, we would love to interview, we're interested in this candidate. So again, that's why if it's too far out, they're not super eager, maybe somebody else will come is what they're thinking. But usually about 6 weeks out, if they're not getting profiles, we got to start looking. And really the ultimate sweet spot is going to be about 4 weeks out. So 6 weeks out, if there's anybody else submitted, there might be somebody that can start a bit sooner that, being able to start sooner helps, right? You may be the more experienced candidate that they've got nobody, they've got to leave, they've got to cover. And so that's where start date comes into play. But usually about a month out is when you're really in that spot of getting offers. It feels tomorrow. We've got compliance, facility has compliance. So although everything you see everywhere says ASAP, we are in healthcare, so nothing is ASAP. We need drug screens, background checks, right? All these facilities are going to likely be Joint Commission certified, so we've got to get all your documents in place internally as well. That's actually kind of a sidebar of why we don't get a ton of compliance done much earlier, right? It'd be nice when we first connect with somebody a year in advance to get all of their compliance done. But then they all expire because most of the requirements are updated resumes within X amount of weeks of starting. And so that's why it's kind of more the gas you hit fast in travel. So it's us talking 6 weeks out, trying to start submit. Probably about 4 weeks is when you're really getting those interviews and offers. You're accepting an offer, and then we hit the gas on compliance. And so that's kind of always, I wish it wasn't a scramble. Every now and then you have like the perfect scenario. You've already been traveling, the facility needed nothing extra, and it's easy, but we're healthcare. So, drug screen with an X, background check with an X. So we're getting those compliance documents together, and that kind of sweet spot between accepting a contract and then starting a contract. You're also typically simultaneously looking at housing. We can set up housing. We have a housing vendor we use, but we have seen that I'm old enough that I used to always set up housing and do apartment leases. But nowadays, with so many neat resources, travelers have really seen that opportunity to set up their own housing, control the financial cost of that, right? What's not spent on housing, they're getting to make extra. They can control where they live, right? So they may not want to have the apartment right next to work. They want to be near the beach or a walkable area. And so kind of that time period between signing a contract and starting a contract, right? Our travelers are usually looking for housing, getting that, setting up. Our compliance team is getting all the docs in order, and then we're waiting for that clearance. So that's kind of that 2 to 4 week out window. Again, you may accept a contract 3 weeks out, but typically I feel like a month is typically that sweet spot. And every now and then you have a traveler that can start tomorrow. They came back from vacation and they're ready to roll. And so of course facilities love that. The quicker the better. But again, with compliance, ASAP is usually 2 weeks, and that's fast. So 4 weeks out is kind of typically when we're going to be submitting. So we get you compliance, do the housing, and then we get the all clear. So the facility's going to all clear us. You're good to go, good to start. And then they're going to send us that couple of days before you start is typically when we get your first day information and the time card process. The reason they kind of wait on that first day, we'd love it also way in advance, but they've got their own changes. Somebody might be out of office that might be meeting you for orientation. So usually you're seeing that first day come through right before. So that week before, you're pretty busy. You're probably traveling to the job. We're getting the final all clear on compliance. We're getting your first day, but then we get that. So all clear, ready to roll, and then you'll start the assignment. So hopefully that kind of walks you through the timeline of when to connect with an agency. Again, it's just never really too early to understand what travel is. I've talked to people for years and years before it was the right time, but I felt like they were really confident when they did because they were able to understand what was on the other side of it. Sometimes travelers will set up job alerts really early on in their desired area to get a feel for the market, right? If you really wanted a specific location, are there jobs coming through there, right? If that was the only space that was making you kind of want to jump into travel, maybe we should look at other areas, or maybe it's not the right time to travel. Let's see what happens. I use the example like Florida used to be just the craziest job market. There's still definitely jobs, but it's not where like you used to be able to, I want this city block, and now it's a little bit more, I hope to get around this city, this area. And so it's good to get a feel for the market early. And then about 2 months prior, making sure we got your profile ready. 6 weeks out, let's submit and see if we get a little bit lucky. Probably you're really getting lucky about 3 to 4 weeks out before, which can be a little tricky if somebody's leaving a perm job. You may want to wait to give that notice till you get that offer. I feel like I might want to do that to feel more confident. Whereas our travelers that are currently going, right, they're just jumping from assignment to assignment. So that 4 to 6 weeks out timeline, and then we're hustling on compliance. So hopefully that helps explain a little bit on the timeline prior to traveling and what that looks like. And then of course, then once you get on contract, we talk you through all the timeline too of, it's a 13-week contract. So you're going to start, we're going to make sure it goes well. And then believe it or not, remember that timeline, 6 weeks out, we're already looking. So that's why, again, we just really emphasize recruiter relationship. It is important just because we are in touch a lot. We got to constantly be looking. You're 6 weeks into a contract and we're already asking you, what are we doing next? And so it turns around pretty quick, just to make sure if somebody did want to have a contract lined up directly afterward, we've already done that to do that. We're not going to be looking for a new contract the last week of your contract. We're doing that probably 2 months before. So constantly kind of asking what's next, what are we doing? Possibly you may want to extend some time off, and then that might push it out a little bit. But if somebody was wanting back-to-back contracts. So again, hopefully it helps with the timeline. Please do reach out to us with any specific questions on that, but just thought it might be helpful to share kind of what that looks like and when we're really going to be jumping into the submittal and interview process. A bit different, especially compared to the perm world where that might be lined up months in advance, and ours it's fast. It's very fast and furious in the travel space of you can submit in the morning, have an offer by lunch, and you are signed by the evening. It's not always that fast, but it definitely can be. And so that's why it tends to be kind of this sped up timeline closer to start date. We appreciate the opportunity to share this information.